So, hello, Jessica. Really welcome here. I am so glad to have you here. A place where I like to talk with um, Americans, professionals, and we can teach. We can learn with you guys about your reality of work. So I'm really glad. Thank you so much for uh, having a time to do this. We are recording on a Sunday, so I really, really, really appreciate.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy and excited. And, I want to provide any information or, um, any answers people might need of, what's going on here in America. And of course, you and I have talked before in messaging, and you brought up that there are really good things happening in Brazil too, in this world. So I would like to learn that as well, because when we can exchange information, we can all be better.
Yeah, I really enjoy that, and it's thanks to social media that gives us the opportunity to do that. So it's so good. Like I started following you because someday Fit Learning provided had done a repost that you did, and I believe you did because of your son,
Mhm.
and we will be able to also talk about that. And that's when I knew you. So I started to go into your Instagram, that I will put the link on the show notes. And that's when I got to know you and start seeing your work and your stories and your all the posting. So that's how I knew you. I have never told you, but now I am telling how did I find you on Instagram.
Awesome.
Uh,
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so excited that we found each other.
yeah. So, like here in Brazil, things are really, really different. And starting from our education, like I always like to start about asking people about their educational backgrounds. And I saw that you have many letters after your name, and these acronyms are really confusing. And sometimes it's really confusing how things um, work in the US, because things works in really different ways for us here with education. So I would ask you to tell us what is your background education. I know that is psychology. And here we also have a bachelor's degree in psychology, that it's a 5 years degree. But we have a whole different system on masters and doctoral programs and licensing professions here. So I will ask you to tell us how was your background, how you started, and then we go from there.
Okay, yeah, great. So I went to school for undergrad at a school in California. We have a lot of public schools in the United States, so every state will have public universities, and in California, our two public university systems are the UC system. Like most people have heard of UCLA. That's University of
Yeah.
California, Los Angeles. Yeah. So that's a famous UC, but there are a bunch of less famous UCs. So I went to a less famous one called UC Riverside, so University of California, Riverside. And we also have Cal States. That's another public university. So it's California State. And then there are different places. So one that you guys have probably heard of that's pretty famous is Cal Berkeley. Um, Actually, that's University of California. Never mind. That's University of California, Berkeley. But
Okay.
California State, like there's like Cal State LA, there's Cal State Fresno, Cal Poly Pomona. So in other words, it's a little bit different in the US because I sometimes I talk to people from other countries and they only have like state sponsored schools. We also have private universities. So you may see people that are here that go to private universities, and some of those are based on religion. So, for example, like Notre Dame That's a Catholic university, right? But then you have others, like I'm a professor at a school called Azusa Pacific. That's a private Christian university. So in other words, just to say that in the United States, you can find both public and private schools. And depending on what school you go to, the cost may be, less or more. You might be able to get funding. So sometimes the schools will pay for you. We have a pretty good system for providing tuition payments for people who can't afford it. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of funny because in the US, probably one of our largest groups of people is the middle class, right? So we have like people in the middle, they're not making a lot of money, but they're not in poverty, right? Mm-hmm. And the people in the middle class sometimes are the ones that have a bit of a harder time finding funding or paying for things. And you've probably heard of the student loan crisis. Yeah. That's a big issue with the student loan crisis is people have to take out money because college can get really expensive here. To give you an idea, when I went to UC Riverside, I think my total 4 years was around maybe 26,000. That same university today, so I graduated 2004. I believe today it's closer to 90,000 for those 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really has increased tremendously, even in the last, 2 decades. So anyway, in the United States, when you get a bachelor's degree, it's usually going to be a 4-year degree. That's kind of the general time is 4 years. So that's what I did first. I got a bachelor's degree, and just some people do take longer, and that's okay. Especially people who are like in the sciences. A lot of times you get like a biomedical student or an engineer student, and they may be in school for 5 or 6 years for their bachelor's, but they have a more complex study program. It's a little bit harder. And so it may take them a little longer. For me, my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's degree was in psychology. And it was interesting to me. I liked it. I had a roommate who was in that field. Initially, when I went to college, I wanted to be a medical doctor, but I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I didn't really know how to navigate the system. So there was things I didn't understand. Like, for example, if you're going to school in the US, it really doesn't matter what your bachelor's degree is in. You could really go to any graduate program as long as you get you fulfill the requirements. I didn't understand that. So I thought, well, if I don't do a biomed major, that's it. I can never be a doctor. And that wasn't true, actually. I could have gone and taken the extra courses I needed and then took a test and got into graduate school. And also, there's people here that go to other countries. Like some people go to the Caribbean and they go to medical school over there. Or I have friends who've gone to India for medical school, and then they come back and then they do a couple more courses, and now they're an American medical physician. So just so if people are wondering, there's a lot of pathways. It's not just you have to be this one major to get to any other, avenue in the future. But again, my major was psychology. And then from there, I went into a master's in special education. And so that master's degree here, it depends on what your programming is, but it's under, a doctorate. It's less than a doctorate. It's a little more than the bachelor's degree. And there are many different fields you can get that degree in. But the reason I did a special education was because I wanted to work as a teacher for a while, and that was going to help me. Here's the other thing I don't know if it's like this in Brazil. I feel like in America, we do sometimes funny things. So the funny thing is in America, especially like in California, if you're an educator, you get paid more to start depending on how many college credits you have. So if you have a master's degree, you're going to start on a higher level of pay.
Okay.
Than somebody who has only a bachelor's.
Okay. Yeah, I get.
And if you have a doctoral degree, you might even get more pay. And maybe I can send you after this just an example, because in the United States, all of our pay is public information if you're a public educator. So everybody gets to know who makes what. So I could send you a pay scale so you can see, so people can see the way it's set up here, because it incentivizes getting, a graduate degree, because you'll make more money. And especially if you're coming into education and you're thinking, of your long term. There's a lot of people who come in and they just like, I want to be a teacher. This is what I want to do. So if that's going to be your whole career, it is really important to start high, because you'll make more money over the longevity of your career, put more in retirement, etc.
And
so
this, I will just, let me just make a pause. Sorry. But let me just tell you how it is in Brazil, because I like to highlight those differences, especially when we talk about ABA. So I am from ABA here in Brazil. And when we talk about certifications, that we will be talking about your certifications, people don't get that masters here in Brazil is different, because only people who will do masters are the ones who want to teach in universities.
Okay.
And they want to do research or work as a professor in the university. So it is more academic and research. So in order for you to go to the field, like to work, people do post-graduations. So when you set this standard that for example, in order to do some exam, you need to have a master. It would be impossible if everyone decided to do a master here in Brazil. Why? I say you that. Because the Department of Education, that is the department that regulates all education in Brazil, including schools, like with kids, like elementary and high school, and higher education, it's all regulated by this organization, that it's a public organization. So it's the Department of Education. The Department of Education does not allow universities to provide lots of students enter the master's program. So it has a limitation on the numbers of students. It's not like in the US. If you have the money to pay, like you have many options of masters, like thousands and thousands of options of masters. And you can do an online program and not even go to the United States and have a master's degree. If you pay so and do all the classes and everything, you can have a master's degree. Here in Brazil, we don't have online master's degree. It's something like that. It's really hard. We are starting to have, but it's not so common. So it will be like in a really limited areas. I don't even know, like on the top of my head, some example to provide to you. And we don't have enough space. Like we also don't have enough money. So people wouldn't have like the kind of money to pay, but that's okay. If considering everybody will have the money. But the Department of Education does not allow universities to provide space to all the students. So it has a limited spots for master's students and doctoral students. So the system is completely different. So that's why, like, I always advocate that, like, the BATB, for example, they shouldn't be like, or any other American organization, like they shouldn't be organizing the profession here, because we have cultural issues that they will not know how to handle. We have different laws, like the whole system. So here, it's so funny, because what you said here, it's something that I usually say, that it's no matter what bachelor's degree, this will not define you. What will define you, it's your master's degree. And here it is not like that. Here, what defines you is your bachelor's degree. So for example, my bachelor's degree, it is in law. So if I don't go and do another here we call graduate course but in the United States, it would be the undergraduate. So psychology, for example, here we call graduate degree. Nurse, dentist, we call graduate degree. and any other, like engineer, any other profession. So if I have done, for example, 5 years of a bachelor's degree in law, but I have never worked as a lawyer. And then I went to the autism world, and then I did a pedagogy degree. So here, pedagogy, that it's like for teachers, it is a 4-year program, but it's not considered a bachelor's degree. So see it how it is like completely a different world. That's what I try to explain to people when we talk about professions and bringing things from the US or any other country, because our educational system is completely different. So for example, I did law and pedagogy, and then I went to do some post-graduations. So here we have this problem with masters, and I like the US system because we enter at university really young. So you don't have to choose what you will do with for the rest of your life. So I like that. So that's why we have so many people doing like 2 or 3 graduate programs. Like me, I did law. And then I entered with the autism world, and I said, okay, I will do pedagogy because I like education. But I was interested in ABA. But I had to do a graduate certificate, because otherwise people would judge me and say, no, you only have a post-graduation in ABA, but you have a graduate certificate on law, because that's your bachelor's degree. So your bachelor's degree, it's what defines you. So it's so funny, and I wanted to tell you all this difference, because I always like to hear people and see how it is like in Europe and how it is in the US. I know more because I have contact with more people. In Canada, like it's really the same as the United States. So that's why I wanted to tell you how different it is. I don't know how it is in Mexico, for example. I don't know if since you have your grandparents there, I don't know if you have more families that are in the university age. So just telling how different it is in each country.
Yeah, and you know what? It's so interesting because it's almost like for you guys, what you're describing, it's almost like it is almost like a master's degree by other words, because you're getting a whole set of training in that graduate degree that you get that's unique to whatever field it is that the graduate degree is in, right? So that, I mean, it sounds like you're very equipped to be a professional in that field when you're done with that graduate degree, which is so different from us, because our bachelor's degrees, unless they are specific, so there's only a few of them, nursing, engineering, those are really the 2. I can't even think of too many more than those 2, that you will leave your bachelor's degree with knowledge of how to do your job as, you know, a nurse or an engineer. But all of our other degrees, for example, psychology, there are a lot of rules and regulations here. So we can't even be a therapist, cannot do certain jobs, even with a psychology undergraduate degree.
That's
but
what
you guys,
I
it
would
sounds
ask
different.
you. Yeah, no, here it is completely different. Like psychology is also a 5 years degree. So people, they leave university, they leave with the feeling that they are not prepared, unless that they already work in some field. For example, we could have someone who already works at schools and they want to go to educational psychology. But then they go and do a post-graduation in educational psychology. That it would be like the master, because usually it is a 2 years course. And so that's how it works. So they leave, for example, psychology. They leave already being able to go to the the board that regulates the profession. Actually, the boards here, they don't regulate the profession. They look for the profession. I forgot the name in English, but it would be like they check if people are respecting their boundaries of professions, if they have some ethical concern. So, but they don't regulate. We only can have a profession regulated here in Brazil by law. So we need to have a law by the senators, and they do the laws, and then we have a profession. So we need to have a law to create a profession, and then this board will go and look for the profession. But the law already set it, organize it, all the profession, like who can be, who cannot be, what can you do, what can you not. So like it's completely different, and it's on a federal basis. So it is for all Brazil. It's not like really separated like the US. So California has some regulations, and Florida and New York. So it is not like that here. So you can leave your bachelor's degree in psychology and already go to work. Like you won't have any trouble to find work, to attending in a practice with just your bachelor's degree. So that's what you were saying, that usually like it is not so possible to do this in the US.
Yeah, no, if you're leaving your bachelor's degree in the United States and you are going to look for work, if you're like, for example, a psychology degree undergraduate, you are going to have a really hard time finding a job. And that's what happened to me, actually. So I got out of school, undergraduate. The jobs that you are able to do really only pay just a little bit more than minimum wage, most of them. Okay. They're not usually salaried. And a lot of times they're really not even truly psychology related. So a lot of my friends worked in group homes. And do you guys even have group homes in Brazil?
No,
do you know
no, we don't.
Okay. Do you know what a group home is?
We are starting, let's see if it is the same. So here, a group home, like what kind of group home were you working on autistic? Or
sometimes, but then they're also, and I think this again is another of these unique problems to the United States. We have a lot of issues as a country with prisons and arrest and things like that. And so some of our kids commit crimes. And when our kids commit crimes, sometimes if we do have juvenile halls, and those are almost like little jails for kids. And I actually work in one, so we can talk about that more later. But additionally, sometimes when these kids are arrested and they go to the juvenile hall, when they get released, they may not go back to their parents. They may be placed in a group home where the judge is basically saying, you have to go to this group home for the next year. And during the next year, there's going to be all these parameters that we set out for you and things you need to do to be able to go home at the end of that year. So it's almost like a restrictive setting, but you're not in a jail, but you are, you can't come and go. If a kid lives at a group home, they live there, they have scheduled outings. There's adults that are there with them around the clock. They're cooking for them. They're taking them to their doctor's appointments. They're making sure that they're not leaving without permission. There's all these rules. So a lot of my friends, when they got done with their bachelor's degree, they were going into these group homes to work as like caretakers, basically, for these kids. That would be a job. Another job I remember a lot of people did was actually registered. Well, it wasn't even called registered behavior technician back then. It was more like behavior therapist. So, they would, find a BCBA. The BCBA would have them doing like in-home therapies. So there was that. Sometimes a substitute teacher. So here, there are certain rules to be a substitute teacher. If they kind of have gotten flexible, because that's another crisis we're having right now. We don't have a lot of teachers are quitting. Yeah, the people are getting fed up, and that's a whole conversation as well. But In the past, you had to have pretty much a bachelor's degree to be able to get on as a substitute teacher. It's a little bit more flexible now, and also depending, there's different, regulations. Some states don't require a bachelor's now, but nonetheless, that was a job people were doing. And so, like I said, it was really, you couldn't just go from psychology to straight on a career. You had to, if you wanted to work in psychology as a career, you have to get a graduate degree, a master's degree or higher, specifically to that area you want to work in. So here, if you want to be, we have a couple of names for our therapists. There's one called a marriage and family therapist. There's one called a social worker or a clinical social worker. And then we also have licensed professional clinical counselor. If you want to do any of those roles, you have to go to a master's degree program. You have to get a certain amount of hours of practice in your field, and then you have to take a test to work as a therapist or in that kind of world. So in other words, you really don't have many options from a bachelor's degree unless you have one in nursing, engineering, or a very specific plan. So some people get a bachelor's degree, but they work for the police force. And in the police force, you get to move up. You can be, something higher in the police force with certain degrees. So that might be what somebody's doing. But most of the time, a bachelor's degree on its own is really not going to be enough to get you into a salaried career. So unless it's an engineer or a nurse, most of the time in the United States, and unless you're going to open your own business and you're really just getting the bachelor's degree to maybe enhance your, business skills or your understanding of the world you're going to work in as a, business person. So it's a little different.
Yeah, totally. Like great. It's great for us to see the differences and what we can learn. Like, I think that the part that it's pretty different here, it's because at the bachelor's degree, you already do an internship. So you complete hours on your bachelor's degree. So when you do to your post-graduation, you are looking for a knowledge in a specific field here. And sometimes you can have some supervised hours, but it's not like in every case. But you already had a hands-on experience during your bachelor's. So if your bachelor's is connected to your post-graduation, that usually it is what it's the most appropriate, you would already have the hands-on experience and an internship that with hours that you have to complete. So that's why I believe like the whole system was built on this reality that you already had an internship. So I had an internship in law and also in pedagogy. So this is something that I don't see at the bachelor's degree in the US.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, there's not. They don't really, if you're in a bachelor's degree program, for the most part in the US, you're not going to have a full-on set of internship hours. You may do an internship just as part of a class or maybe part of a requirement, but you really don't get the same kind of rigorous intern training that you would, for example, as a law student in a master's degree program, right? Or as a person in a school psychology program, or these therapists. I mean, there's specific hours. So for example, most of the therapists have to get 3,000 hours. The school psychologists have to get 1,500 hours. The school counselors have to get 600 to 800 hours. The attorneys, I don't even know what their hours are, but I know that they have specific rules. So anyway, it's really different.
Yep, I get that. So you went to do a master in special education. You did like in 2 years. Why you went to special education? What was your plan? You were planning to go to school, be a special teacher? What was your plan back then?
So, okay, another kind of weird thing that happened to me was that I finished my undergraduate program, and I was offered a teaching job. So at first I started working at something called a non-public school. Another thing that
Okay.
I want, do you have that there in Brazil, a non-public school?
Non-public. So but it is a private. So it is a private school,
So
or it is different. It's not a private, but it's not public. Something in between.
yeah, I think it's very unique to the United States. Again, another one of these things. So a non-public school is a school for kids who are not making it in a regular school day, because of
Oh,
their behavioral or emotional, and sometimes very extreme social problems. It wouldn't be for minor social kind of problems. It would have to
okay.
be very extreme social challenges, like a child who, is constantly, touching other people without their permission and touching, private body parts, things like
Yep.
that. It would have to be an extreme sort
Okay.
of situation. But these non-public schools in our country, we have, our special education is all regulated through the government. And so every child who qualifies for special education, gets something called an IEP. And it may be called
Yep.
something a little different in other states, but individualized education plan. And your team at a school can decide together, including the parent, that this school is really not, supporting the student enough, and we need to put them into another setting where it's specialized for behavior, emotional, social support. And so that would be a non-public school. So that was my first job, is working in a non-public school. I was asked to work there. And it was actually really good for me because, like I said, I really didn't have a lot of job options because my degree was in psychology. So I started there, and from there, I began to get my foot in the door as a teacher. And then I, got a phone call from the school district that I had previously went to school in. I was a student in that district in the past, and they asked me if I wanted to, come to work for them as a teacher. So usually that doesn't happen. Usually you have to get your degree and whatnot first, and then you become a teacher. But at that time, there was a special provision in California state law because, again, at that time, which is, we're 2005 at this point, there were, many issues with getting special education teachers in. There's a shortage. So they had this, provision, and it was called a emergency special education credential. And so that's how I was able to get into teaching. One of the stipulations of being an emergency special education teacher is you had to immediately enroll in a master's degree program or a credentialing program. And that's another thing I need to explain. And it's a little different across the states, but in California, you you have a board in the state of California, and every
Okay.
state's a little different. But this board, it's basically, what is it called? The, California Teaching Commission is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular commission is going to give you a credential, and you need a credential to be a teacher
Okay.
in
I get.
public school in California, and
Mm-hmm.
also to be a principal, school counselor, school psychologist, what have you. So that particular, commission, it's, you can't just go to it. Like I couldn't go to them and say, "Hey, I have these things done. Can you give me my credential?" You have to do it through a university. So it's all tied to the university is going to be the one that puts their paperwork into the commission to get you the credential that you need. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, they have these markers they have to meet. They send your stuff up to the state. The state looks at it. Yeah, cool. You can be a teacher. So that's what happened to me is I had to get into a program so I could get that credential that I needed to officially be a teacher. And so that's how I went into that first master's degree. Because again, it was like, well, if I just get the credential, because that's a possibility. You can just go to school just to get the credential. But remember that pay scale I talked about, you're not going to move over all the way.
Yeah.
And I have to show you it visually because it's literally like
Yeah.
columns. So you're going to move over further on pay in the columns with the graduate degree. So if you just have the credential, yeah, it'll move you over a little bit, but the graduate degree is really going to make that difference. So that's how I went to the first. But then when I was already teaching, I started to see that it was really, unfortunate the way some of these kids were getting treated. They weren't getting assessments that they should have gotten. Sometimes the school psychologist I was working with would just ignore them, or not every 3 years, our kids are entitled to a full new assessment. And there's some, that can change a little bit depending on the situation. Like the pandemic changed it a little bit, but generally speaking, they're entitled to a new evaluation. And usually that involves direct testing. My students, sometimes these are high school kids, the school psychologist wouldn't come test them. He wouldn't provide updated levels. And it was just so upsetting for me to see these kids and their families like waiting for, this updated information and never getting it. And I was like, this is not okay. And then this other thing happened that really just pushed me over the edge. So I had a student, and this student was an intellectually disabled kid. And she was such a sweet girl. Okay. She was probably like a ninth grader at that time. And she would come to school. It's just kind of funny. So she had a picture of an ultrasound from a magazine. She cut the ultrasound from the magazine. Okay. And she told everybody at the school, and this is a big school, thousands of kids. She told everybody who would listen, this is my baby. I'm pregnant. Here's my ultrasound. Okay. So that was the first thing that I saw that I was like, oh, she's like, she's not realizing how that socially is stigmatizing for her. She's not even picking it up. Right. And what I found out is that she was in a class for child development, and that was the unit they were on, the baby development. And she was really into it. She loved the class. And so that's where she got the idea of telling everybody she's pregnant with this ultrasound. So I was her case carrier, and that means I do her IEP. I make sure all the teachers are giving her everything she's supposed to get in her other classes. And she was failing that class for child development. So I talked to the teacher and I said, hey, she's failing. And I told the teacher she has an IEP, and she's supposed to be, all the questions are supposed to be read to her. She's supposed to have notes during her tests. Again, this girl is intellectually disabled, so she cannot read anything. Like, she just couldn't read at that level. It was a very complex level. And the teacher said, it's too bad. She has to do everything that everyone else in this class can do, and that's it. And I was so upset. So I called the school counselor, because they're the ones who make sure our kids in the correct classes. And I told her, look, this teacher's not giving our student their accommodations. And that's very illegal, by the way. Like, you cannot do that here. So the counselor said, oh, that is so unfortunate. And she agreed with me that this teacher was in the wrong. But instead of holding the teacher accountable, they changed the kid out of the class. They moved her to be a TA. And it's like, okay, that's a punishment for the kid because she loves this class. And now, instead of the teacher being held accountable, you're making the kid the responsible party. So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to be able to have a voice for these kids, so I could say definitively, here's the data, here's what we're doing. Like, you cannot violate them. And so that's how I decided I'm doing school psychology master's degree next. So the special ed degree was about 2 years long. It went by really quickly, honestly. And it was, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was pretty straightforward. You just did your coursework. Because I was already teaching, that counted for all my hours. I could count everything. So that was kind of cool because I got paid the whole time, and that was a blessing. The second master's degree for school psychology, it's 2 years of coursework. The first year, you kind of spend more learning about counseling and theories and things like that. The second year, you're focusing on testing. So using assessment tools, what do they mean? Kind of learning the difference between like intelligence measures and social emotional measures and processing measures. So you're just really spending that whole year getting in there and learning these tests, practicing them, writing reports, learning how to write psychoeducational evaluations up. So taking your data and making it meaningful. And then your third year, that's when you spend the year getting those 1,500 hours where you're spending time on a campus and you are doing assessments with kids, you're presenting. At that point, you're covered by the state. So you can actually, like, I could be alone with the kid in a room and do testing with them without somebody watching me, because I have an intern. I'm in an intern situation, so I'm covered. So it's like, but prior to that, you can't just go test a kid. You have to have certain things. And then even still, like, say that, like when I first finished my program and I was fully credentialed with that same body that credentials teachers, I couldn't go outside of the public schools and test kids. So in order to do that, you have to get a separate licensure. So that's what I did, is I got a separate licensure. And that was sort of easy. It really was just paperwork. You had to be working as a school psychologist for 3 years. You do this paperwork. you submit your fingerprints, and then you take a test. And if you pass that test, you could be licensed in California. And it's a little different for every state. But once you get licensed, now that allows you to do private assessment. So now I could say to people, yes, I offer assessment, and I can help you, And so some of your people that would get those kind of assessments privately are going to be families who disagree with what the school says. And another law is that if you don't agree with the assessment that the school gives you, and anywhere in the United States, you're entitled to something called an independent educational evaluation at the cost to the district. So the district has to provide a list of providers or assessors who can do that assessment. And so then as a licensed person, I could be on that list. But a family could also come to me and say, hey, can you test my kid? I need help. I want to learn more about my child and their strengths, weaknesses, intelligence. Additionally, some people use this licensure to work with college students who need ideas for accommodations or who need an evaluation. And here we have another. So there's IEP, and IEPs come under this federal law called IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But then we also have a whole separate law. It's called Section 504. And Section 504 is for anybody with a disability who is like having some kind of limitation. And Section 504 goes for any public agency, including schools. So you could be an employee and say, I want a 504 plan. Yeah, so you could be like a grown adult and say, I need a 504 plan. If you work for if you work for a public agency. So it has to be a agency that's receiving federal funds, and even some private agencies. So for example, a private university, but people there are getting student loans through the government. A kid there could still be eligible for Section 504. Section 504 is a little bit different than an IEP, because with an IEP plan, the kid is going to get a full-on, multiple page plan, all these protections. So it's kind of like you have IEPs, and above that you have 504. So everyone who has an IEP technically has a 504, but everybody who has a 504 doesn't have an IEP.
Yes.
So yes. So then the 504 people, they might, need certain accommodations, and that's really what a 504 is about. So think about it in this way: a person who needs a ramp to get up to a building instead of stairs. That's like a 504 accommodation. If you didn't have that built in, it'd be like, we have to put a ramp for this person. So it's like getting them the same access as the person who doesn't have a wheelchair. Or if you think about it in a different way, it could be like, okay, the student is blind, but they don't need an IEP because they don't need special, instruction. They just need access to Braille. So then that's the accommodation for the 504. And it can get really creative, that 504, because there are a lot of it could be any exactly because it could also be a mental impairment as well. So it doesn't have to just be a physical disability. It doesn't have to be a disability you can see. So for example, a person who has dyslexia, and let's say the dyslexia is not so intense that they need an IEP. They have dyslexia, but they're just a slower reader, and it's just taking them longer. So then maybe for those people, when they go to college, they're going to need extra time to take a test. And maybe for these books that are like a lot of information, maybe they're going to need audiobooks or books on tape. But you don't have to change anything about the college course. Whereas the IEP in high school and elementary and all that, you can actually change the coursework with the IEP. You can say, we're not going to learn all of these, principles. We're only going to hit these principles because this kid is really going to struggle with having to learn 15 principles. So we're going to have them learn 10, and we're going to call that appropriate for their education. So you can actually modify the curriculum with the IEP. With the 504, you're just accommodating the person. You're not changing what's required of them. You're just helping them get there in a supported fashion.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I get that. Great. Really good, because the only bad thing that I see in the US that it's different from Brazil is that here private companies would also be obligated to to do that, to fall like under 504. So we also have protection here for like adults and the working environment, but private and public. So that would be a good thing that in the US like would be the right thing to do. Like everyone should have to follow like these rules to protect the rights of the ones that need that. So that's something that I see that Brazilian laws, they are more protective. So everyone needs to respect, like, and this goes to private and public schools. So every company, like business companies, private and public. And in the US, what I see is that the private companies and the private schools, they are not required to go into the same laws as the public ones. So that's something that I think that Brazil like has this good point, because it brings like everyone to do to respect the same law. And with that, we can have like the rights more protective for the ones that needs the most. That's something that I see it.
I agree.
Yeah, it is so funny because here, when I was in Orlando and I was in Disney, and the monorail at Disney, like it had a problem. So it was a Friday night at Magic Kingdom, and you only could leave the park after the fireworks. You could only leave the park with the boats. And it was like a huge line, lots of people. And then you have like people with a wheelchair, or older people, and people with some disability, and they were all at the same line. If we were in Brazil, we would have a special line for those people. So since we are like a struggling country, a third world country, usually people think that things in the US are always better than here because the US has more money than Brazil. And the system works better in the US, like for many, many things. But that's something that really marked me, how the law, they are not so protective for the ones that they need more than others. So we should have like a special line, a special part of the boat, like a special line, and then these people could go before the others, because we have many people there that could wait, like lots of youngers, but many others that could not. So that's really like marked me how different it is, because here if you go to the bank or any place, it has a category of people who would have priority, and people up to 60 years old, women who are pregnant, women who are feeding their kids, with babies, and person with disabilities. So that's I think that it's a good thing to do and to have it.
Yes, that makes so much sense, and you're right. And I do want to say to everybody there in Brazil listening, we get a lot of things wrong in the United States. I'm sure you see on the news a lot of things that happen here that are scary, and I think sometimes other countries look and wonder how could that happen. But we have for example, like our school shootings. I mean, how is that? I mean, I asked myself that. How does that happen over and over and over again? It is insane that happens here. So There's things that we do well, like protecting our students, with disabilities in schools, but there's things that we don't do well, like we should not be having mass shooters over and over again. There's
Yeah.
something, in my opinion, systematically wrong with whatever we're doing that's causing this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the good thing about learning with each other and other nations. We can always learn, like, even when you think that someone is under position, in inferior position that you are, but we can always learn. That's something that I like to think about. We can, like, always learn with each other. So let's talk about those many letters that you have on your bio on Instagram, because now we will be able to match everything that we talked about, your education and all the letters in your name. Some you already told us how it was, but not like the letters. So, for example, nationally certified school psychologist.
Yep. So for a nationally certified school psychologist, there are a couple ways you can get there. One is your program, where you go to your graduate program, is what you call accredited. So accredited by the National Association of School Psychologists, which essentially means, and short for that is NASP. And essentially what that means is that you hit certain markers in your program. Your program required certain things that align with what is required for accreditation. And so if your graduate program does that, then at the end of the program, you take a test. We all take a test called the Praxis. And this test, the Praxis, is a test that basically clears us to be a school psychologist. It says, what you're supposed to know. So it's like a board test that I think everyone in the United States takes that test at some point to be a school psychologist. You have to get a certain score or higher on that test and have this accreditation to become an NCSP. That's one path. Another path that's possible is that you go to a school that's not accredited by NASP, but you can do a portfolio, which requires certain things, like you have to, do certain tasks and write a certain kind of report. And I'm not exactly familiar with all of the steps, but if you do that portfolio and you submit it, you can also get national certification. And in California, for example, it's not totally necessary to be a nationally certified school psychologist, but other states, it is either required or you are heavily favored for having that distinction. So other states will even give you extra pay or a stipend for it. In California, it's not so required. It's, it's a bonus, but I don't think anyone in California is really going to say you have to have that. But other states do have that. They do require it. And the good thing about having that is that if you are working in one state and you decide to go to another, becoming certified in that state as a school psychologist is going to be a lot easier. And for some states, that NCSP will just let you transfer right over. So it's a helpful, it's helpful to have. So,
yeah, I like this system. Like, I think that it is fair because you do a test. So it's a way to provide, try to provide like a better quality of services for people who needs it. So everyone will know that you had gone to certain standards to be in that profession. So I like this system. And then we have licensed educational psychologist.
Yep, and that's the one I was mentioning earlier. When you're a school psychologist for 3 years in California, you can, do some paperwork, take a test, and then that will allow you to now do assessment independently. You don't need to work in a school with that. So privately, I could do assessment. Like today, I could I could say, hey, I'm available for assessment if anybody needs assessment, and people come to me and I could write a report and give it to them outside of the school. So that was just, we have a board here. There's all these boards and there are just so many little bodies, right? But this other board is called the California Board of Behavioral Sciences. And the California Board of Behavioral Sciences is the one that gives you this licensure. They also cover um, other professions, like for example, if you're going to get licensure as a marriage family therapist, or if you're going to get licensure as a clinical social worker, you would go through this board. Which I'll just go to the next one, which is APCC. It's Associate Professional Clinical Counselor. And that required me to do another year of coursework and then internship hours. So the A is for associate, and that is letting you know that I'm getting hours for that. When I finish that, the A will change to an L, and it will be a licensed professional clinical counselor, which is also through that same board. Being a licensed professional clinical counselor means that I can do therapy with people and independent, privately, and I don't need to be attached to a school for that. So when I decided to go back for that, I had already finished my school psych program, and I saw an opportunity, and I went back to school to do it. And like I said, it was only a year long, about a year and 2 months long program. I'm really happy I did it because the law changed around it. So now you can't go back and do that. You can only get that particular type of certification as part of a graduate degree. So if I were to, like, say I didn't get it and I wanted to go do it today, I'd have to go get a whole graduate degree to get that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a good thing I did it. I just need to finish my hours. It's 3,000 hours. So
Wow,
it's
3,000.
yeah. I'm like, okay, I'll just take my time on that. But the good thing is, if I, well, let me not say if, let me say when I get that done, I'll
Yeah.
be able to offer private counseling, and, it would just be help to make like a well-rounded, like clinician for me, like, so it's like, okay, I don't just do testing. I don't just help with ABA, but now I can also help with counseling. So it helps me to have like, these different hats that I can wear.
Yeah, I totally get it. So you would have to do like a third master if we would want to do like now after the law
Yeah.
changes.
And so what I always try to tell students, because some of the master's programs for school psychology and school counseling have that pathway built into them. So I tell them, if you're ever interested in being a counselor, just add those coursework on now. Don't, even though it's going to be more courses and it's going to be a little bit of a bigger headache in your undergraduate, or excuse me, in your graduate degree, it's
Mm-hmm.
worth it because you're going to
Yeah.
have a whole another set of skills. And again, with school psychology and school counseling, you're limited to the school setting. So this licensed professional clinical counselor path opens opportunities for private assessment. And if you're wanting to be a business owner in the future, that you cannot do it as just a school counselor or school psychologist. I mean, technically you could open a business, but you would be limited on the offerings you can give, because you can't use your school counseling or school psychology credential outside of the schools. That's why you need these licensures.
Oh, okay. And also to be covered by insurance.
Yes, yes. So especially with the LPCC, you're viewed as a viable therapy provider. So you can begin to partner with insurance panels and
Mm-hmm.
get cleared to them through them and be able to provide therapy legitimately as a private practitioner.
Okay, I get. So you did all that when you went to ABA because like you were, as you tell me, you were like in a whole other path of psychology. I know that special education and ABA like are it is really common to have ABA inside special education programs. But you were more on a counseling and psychology like path. And then you also have a BCBA credential. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, so with that, so what happened was around 2015, a school district hired me, and they told me that if I got the BCBA, well, if I did the coursework, that they would pay for it.
Okay.
And in turn, I could do all my hours there, and of course, I'd still get paid, and I'd be able to like clear all the coursework and sit for my test, and they would pay for all of that. So it seemed like a really good opportunity. So I moved to that school district, And what ended up happening is they assigned me a supervisor. And the supervisor wasn't from the school district. They were from another entity, but that's related to the school district. The supervisor, she didn't want to supervise me. I think she was, in America, we have this phrase, I don't know if you guys have it there, voluntold. It's like you didn't get to volunteer, but you kind of were like, hey, if you do this, it'd be really good. But like you're voluntold, right?
Okay.
So that's, I think, what happened to her. She got voluntold. And so I don't think she was very happy with having to serve as a supervisor. And so she was really standoffish and didn't want to help me, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, so for example, I supervise somebody now, and I'm constantly asking her, okay, tell me what you need help with. Is there something I can provide? And if she says that she doesn't need help with anything in the moment, I'll still go find things for her. So I'll say, okay, well, you know what? I came to the clinic last week. I saw these things happening. And you know what? I think that this article can help you, or I think this resource could be helpful for you. My supervisor at that time, she didn't do any of that. She was really like, either I had to bring her something or she wasn't going to help me. It was very, and for me, I'm a student at this point. Yeah, I'm well into my career, but ABA was completely new for me, as a science, as a study. So I don't know what to bring to my supervisor. I need my supervisor's help to figure out how to navigate, right? And she didn't want to do it. And, I think at that point I said, you know what? I don't think that I'm going to be able to get my hours. I'm going to move back to school psychology, and I'm going to put this program on pause. And so that's what happened. I put on pause, but a couple of my professors from the ABA program, because I was doing it in person at that time, they told me, you shouldn't give up. You should try to do this ABA coursework through a different place. And they told me about Florida Institute of Technology.
Okay.
And so again, that was 2015. So I'm thinking, okay, well, okay, I'm going to do it. But then I kind of put it on pause, and I didn't go back to it. And I thought about it. And then I kept hearing, the task list is going to change. And when the task list changes, there's going to be more hours required and more coursework. And I was like, I better get this done now. Simultaneously, a friend of mine left the education system and opened her own ABA clinic. And so I was able to go provide some parent training and to work with some kids in home. And I was like, yeah, now's the time for me to really continue on with this program. So I started again at FIT, Florida Institute of Technology online. And it was so much better for me because it, was just so much more ease of taking the coursework. And I don't know if you know Jose Martinez Diaz, but I loved him. He's so good, so he just like inspired me. It made me feel like, okay, this is really a good path. And I'll say this too, even though I had all those degrees and experience, and by this time, I think probably 15, almost 16 years in at that time, maybe 14 to 16 years in. And, I like when I was learning stuff in that coursework. Hi, buddy.
Sorry, Jess. Yes, I just have a little guy here. Say hi.
Hi. Oh my goodness. I love his hair. It was so cute.
He just arrived. They were buying some food, and then my husband found 4 dogs abandoned in front of our condo, and then he brought to our house. Oh my God! He's telling me that my husband will give a shower on all the dogs. They are puppies and so cute. We have dogs. We love dogs, but we don't want to have more dogs because we had like a really bad experience last year. 3 of our dogs died, like different situations, but like we suffered a lot. So we are not ready to have another puppy. And we already have like 2 older dogs. They have like 12 years old, 11 years old, something like that. They are old. And another one that it's a Shih Tzu, and she's 3 years old. So we are like enough with dogs for now. But we will help to get a home for these puppies. So we will go to a shelter and help them. So we are putting photos and videos for the ones who want to adopt. So, but like we really love dogs, and it's like we stay so sad when we see a puppy abandoned. So something that we like to do. Like we love animals. So we have 3 habits here: the 3 dogs and the turtle. So
okay.
so we have a full house already. But sorry.
No,
He
totally
just wanted
good.
to give me a hug.
Oh, I totally understand that. My son is like that too. Same. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to enjoy while they want. I know that you have
Yes.
I don't know, he's 18. You have 2 kids,
20.
right?
Yes.
20.
I have one that's 20 and then my 11-year-old.
Yeah,
And it goes really
20.
fast.
Yeah,
It goes so fast.
I'm not ready to have for them to grow up.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
I get. So you were telling that you went to fit. You went like going back and stop it and going back, and then you finally decided to, oh, now I will go.
Yes. And what I was saying is that even though I, had all these years of education and experience, it was a totally new language for me. And I thought I understood behavior because we have to, under IDEA, our federal law, we have to implement functional behavior analysis, behavior intervention plans. Those are protections and supports offered to all students under IDEA. So I thought I knew it pretty well. And then I get into this coursework and I'm like, oh, wow, like this is a whole different subject matter, language, etc. So it was a really good thing for me because I was just learning so much that I did not understand previously about all of the nuances of ABA and really the science behind it. And really just understanding how it's so different than psychology. Even though in most places in the United States, ABA is housed under psychology. Like if you go to a university, for the most part, it's housed under psychology, but it's not psychology. I mean, it's so different. And just understanding how scientific ABA is in comparison to psychology, because psychology is not scientific. It's very hypothetical, right?
Yep.
And we can never control for all of the things outside of, our experiment in psychology. But, in ABA, you can really control a lot. And you can see when you implement and remove what happens with the behavior. So, so that's how I went into the BCBA work. And then I started to pick up a ton of hours in working with families in the clinic and working with families in home, a little bit at work, some program design, and being able as well to support some of our educators in implementing ABA, like I wouldn't say it would be an ABA program, but implementing ABA based practices to help their students. And so that's how I got into the BCBA world, is just kind of saying, wow, wait a minute, like this is a really good skill set to have. I can impact so many other people, and I can help families. And that's probably the most important part for me, is helping families. I feel like what happens sometimes, at least here, is because you can go to an ABA degree and you don't have to be an educator at all to get an ABA degree, which is great. But then sometimes an ABA person, a person who's a BCBA especially, will try to support a family in their special education rights, and they don't know how to navigate that world. So it's really nice for me because I'm able to say, okay, here's what we can do, ABA wise, but let me help that IEP. Let me help you get what your child needs, what they're entitled to, because unfortunately, there is a lot of misunderstanding on how we should protect kids in schools, how to support their behavior, and to get them what they need. So that's really, to me, the best thing about having, both the school background and now the BCBA, is that I can help families in a really holistic way. And I really like that.
Yeah. It's like wonderful. And what I think that it's so funny is that like you were like a completely professional when you went to like, no, now I will do like this another certification, another I will start, like, it's not start again from the beginning, but not totally beginning, but you went there and said, okay, I will go for more hours. Like you already had went through like many programs to do your hours. Like each of your licenses, you go to different requirements, and then you went to the BCB and you also did. And like this is so amazing, how you put yourself into this situation, because you could like, no, I will stay here with what I have, and that's fine for me, because you could go like to other paths in your career to do other things, but then you did, and also went to the ABA world. So like it's really inspiring for everyone who are like trying to find their place in their career and experimenting what they like more, how they feel more comfortable doing. So like really, really like inspiring. Like I love it. I didn't know like all of this. And then you did all your hours. How did you do like inside your job?
Yeah, most of them, for the BCBA, it was a little bit different because I started that in 2018 and I finished the coursework in 2020 during the pandemic, actually, but I didn't test until 2021. So I had a really long period of time with which to get the hours done. So it was a lot more, I guess you would say, comfortable getting those hours. I didn't feel so pressured, because with the school psychology, for example, you have to get the 1500 in 1 year. That's really, I mean, I guess technically you could go longer, but if you go longer, it's going to be a really big headache. So you're really, there's a lot of pressure there to get in, get your hours done, and move on. But for the BCBA, it was more lenient. You have 5 years, and I
Yeah.
knew it was different for me because I didn't really have 5 years because I had to test before the task list changed.
Oh,
I mean, I
okay.
guess I technically didn't have to test before the task list changed because you could, if you did your coursework like me and you decided to test after the task list change, you would just have to test on the new materials. You wouldn't need new coursework. But I
Okay.
didn't want to test on the new materials. I was like, no,
Yeah.
I know these materials. I'm just going to get this all done. And I really took my test. I think it was like December 18th of 2021. The task list changed January 1st. In fact,
2022.
I even had a contingency plan because we were going to New York. So my contingency plan was I found a testing center in Brooklyn that if I didn't pass on the 18th, I was going to sign up for a test at the Brooklyn Center.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and it was so crazy because even at that time, I think there were a lot of people that were having the same idea, like we need to just get this test done. So it was really hard to find an appointment. And when I went to the testing center, like we have these testing centers run by Pearson, and they're very, I don't know, sanitized, I would say. It's very, particular. And when I got there, usually you get there and there's maybe, two or three people. A lot of people go through these testing centers to take their tests, like, for different areas. But the amount of people that were being called back for, ABA exams, it was like 20 people. It was so hard to find any testing center. I had to actually drive to LA. It was really hard because everybody was trying to get it wrapped up before, the big change.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, so for me, I always wanted to be a person who can advocate for families and kids really well in a well-rounded manner. And I thought, this is the ultimate skill set for me. And honestly, having gone through the program now, I can say, and I tell people, I'm like, look, if you have to be honest with yourself, ABA is really the best way to look at life, people, problems, etc., because it's very scientific, right? I get that, you have to sometimes, take a more therapeutic approach because of the situation or the trauma people have been through. But at the end of the day, if you're learning a new skill, if you're teaching somebody something, ABA is where it's at. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And it really is just naturally occurring in our environment, right? I mean, from the time we're born, we're constantly coming into contact with, contingencies. We're being reinforced, we're being punished just by the environment alone. So it's really important to understand that. And I always tell people, I'm like, once you get ABA exposure, it's really hard to go backwards. You're looking at everything through that lens from now on. So even though I can put the therapeutic lens on, ultimately my like most useful, I think, approach is ABA, no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah, great. That's usually what I listen to. For example, SLPs who start to work, learn about ABA. They say this to me. Okay, I am an SLP. Like I'm not an ABA therapist, and some they stay in a conflict of identity, and it's so funny. And because like I went like directly to ABA, so I didn't have this conflict. So for me, it was ABA, and okay, it is this and this, and I didn't have this conflict. Some things with education, education, yeah, like different approaches on pedagogy I had, but I was already learning and having results with ABA. So I just like, no, I don't agree with this in pedagogy. I don't agree with that. So, but I see these a lot with SLPs. They say, no, I can't like get ABA out of me because I am an SLP. But this makes so sense for my profession as an SLP. So, okay, I will use it, this science, in my practice. So this is what I say. No, you don't need to be an ABA therapist. You can have your continue with your appointments as an SLP, but you can bring like verbal behavior to your practice and reinforcement and functional assessments. You don't need to change your practice. You are just adding science to your more science, because it's not saying that SLP is not science based and everything. No, you are adding more science, you're adding more techniques that has results. So see through this lens, because people usually, oh, you need to be this or that. Either you are an ABA therapist or you are an SLP. Like here we have this discussion. And I say, no, you can be an OT or a PT, and you like just bring this knowledge to your practice. So it's so funny what you were saying that matches so much this talk and this conflict of identity that many professionals they have. Like here, I don't know if this happens in the US, but here it happens a lot. So it's so good for you to telling me this, because you had a whole career before like going more intense into ABA. And for us to going to our end, because I know that I am taking so much to your of your Sunday. But tell me, what's your work today? How is your day look like? I know I watch your stories, and I know that many times you were visiting schools. You are not directly, you don't work for a particular school anymore, do you?
So no, I work for, again, another kind of different thing, because I don't think any other countries in the world have what you call counties. Do you know have you ever heard of a
No,
county?
yeah, I heard, because
Yeah.
when I am in the US, yeah, but we don't have here. Here we
Yes.
have a state, and you have like cities,
Okay.
but you don't have a county. Yes, it is different.
Yes, I think I had heard that sometime where they said that United States is the only country with counties. So basically, a county is several cities in an area, and some of them are really, vast areas. We have some very
Yeah.
large counties. So in California, you might work for a school district, but then you can also work for something called a county office of education. If you work for a county office of education, you're going to have a really unique job, because county offices of education provide education for kids that school districts are unable to provide education for. So I'll give you some examples. The first is when kids here are expelled, meaning they cannot come back to school. They do something that's against the
Really?
rules.
Okay.
And it's usually pretty, egregious. But we have education code that defines like what discipline requires expulsion. So if a kid is expelled, by law, they can't go back to their school. They can't go back to the place they came from. You're just not allowed. So the state of California has to provide a setting for those kids. You can't just say you can't go to school, that's illegal. So we have to provide a school for them to go to. So county offices of education will provide a special school called a community school. So community school, you're expelled, you need to go to school, you may go to a county community school. And, the parents can also choose other schools, like some of them choose like a charter school, or some of them choose like online virtual type of schools that are all technically charters. But many of them choose a community school, which we as county offices of education, we run those schools. And there's several county offices of education in California. Okay, so that's one program. Another program or another type of program might be our programs for kids who have significant intellectual disabilities and adaptive challenges. And the reason why we have those programs is because the number of kiddos that are going to qualify for these kind of programs are going to be so low per district, because there's just, in the population, there's just not that many children that are going to need this very, very intense setting. And so, for example, I'm talking about kids who may not use words, they might be in wheelchairs, they may need certain kind of care because they're unable to do self-care. So every school district might have like one or two children that have that significant amount of need, right? And so what happens is the school districts pool their money and they give it to the county, and the county then provides a teacher and a classroom and aides and whatever else these kiddos need. So that's another kind of way that the county offers support. Additionally, for our kids, like we had like programs for visually impaired students. So you're a child and you need visual impairment support, but every school district's only going to have a couple of those kids, maybe not even more than one. So they can't afford to have a whole program at their school because there's only one kid in the whole district that needs that program. So the school district's not going to hire a teacher just for one student. They're going to pool their money with the district next door and the district down the street. And then the districts are going to together pay the county to run that program. So in other words, the county ends up running programs for kids that school districts either can't independently afford to provide for, or that are so specialized that it would be really difficult to find a teacher to just work in one school district for those kiddos. So then the other thing in California that county offices of education provide is school for kids who are in juvenile hall. So if you're arrested and you go to juvenile hall, you immediately get put in school. And so we operate the schools, but we don't operate the juvenile halls. So it's like we have two agencies operating in the juvenile halls. You have the county, which is just like, it's just called the county. So like, for example, I work in San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County runs the whole juvenile hall. San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools runs the schools. So we don't lock kids up. We don't, have to do with their court. We're just in there providing the service of school.
Education.
So, and yes. And so that's my role currently, is to work in the juvenile halls. We have two of them. One that is for kids who are getting arrested, and usually they're not going to be in this program very long. Most of them are going to get released, or they may end up going somewhere else. But then we have another program that's a long-term program. And these kids have committed some severe crimes, and most of them are going to be in that long-term program until they're about 25. So yeah, so that's my main role. And then I also provide some support for something called a probation school. So sometimes when kids have probation officers, they've committed a crime and they're able to live at home, but the probation officer is monitoring them, they may go to a probation school. There's still our teacher there. It's still a school program, but probation officers are present just in case there's an issue or a problem. So these kids are just more carefully monitored. And so anyway, those are my main roles. And then sometimes I help colleagues. Like I have colleagues who work in other programs that we have, and they may need help with, like, I have a colleague who's asking for help with the functional behavior analysis right now. So, I'm helping him with that. Or I might have a colleague that, needs support with IEP development. They're helping a teacher and they need support. So I might support that. And then I do a lot of presentations and trainings through my work. But then beyond that, I have recently opened my own business. So I opened my business in July, and I'm really trying to like continue to move it and get it off the ground. But obviously, I'm trying to maintain my day job while doing that. So
Your
it's a little
main
scale.
job, that it's already a
Yes,
lot.
yes,
So it is in the
yes.
county. Like you work like all day there, probably.
Yes, yes. But the nice thing is that in schools, we don't work every day. We have a calendar. So like our teachers here usually work 182 days a school year.
Okay.
And I work 215 days a school year. The nice thing is we can choose our calendar at work, so I can put days off here and there. So sometimes what I'll
Okay.
do is I'll like have, okay, I'm working only 4 hours this day and I have this Friday off. And so it kind of helps to open up my time a little bit more. But yeah, so my business is called Strive ABC, and I did the ABC for assessment, behavior support, and consultation. But of course, then it also is like antecedent behavior consequence, but that's just like
Mm-hmm.
a bonus for anybody who is in that world. And my main role in this company is going to be to provide one-on-one behavioral aids for school settings, because there's so many school districts right now that need one-on-one support in the form of aids, and they can't find them because there's such a shortage of workers. So my company would be able to provide workers. I'm working towards getting that all set up. And then additionally, my company provides consultation and trainings and presentations for districts. And so I've done a few of those as well.
Okay, like great. So, and you usually give some aid like already trained to the school district, like it has some initial training.
Yes. So anybody that we would provide as an aid to a district would be fully trained. Since you're familiar with Florida and you know Brett and Fit, you might
Mm-hmm,
also have
mm-hmm,
heard of PCM, Professional Crisis
mm-hmm,
Management. Have you
mm-hmm.
heard of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we would train our aides in PCM as well in case there's, some type of a behavioral emergency. They would have, a way to cope with that behavioral emergency in a safe and calm way. And then additionally, they would have all their behavioral training. They would know the student's behavior intervention plan. And that would be their biggest job, is to make sure that they're implementing the behavior intervention plan, providing the reinforcement. Because what happens a lot of times in schools, if the student has some significant behavioral challenges and the teacher has 30 kids in the class,
Yeah.
they're not able to get to that student. So we provide a lot of one-on-one aids to do the work of making sure that the student is reinforced properly, making sure that the behavior plan is implemented the way it's supposed to be. And typically, the school is going to give you that plan. They're going to say, this is our behavior intervention plan that we have for the student. I might say, oh, I think we can change a few things that would make it better for the student. But at the end of the day, it's the school district's decision on what that plan is going to look like. So our aides would just be there as a support to implement the plan, help the student, and to make sure that the student is really getting, the reinforcement that they need to really make that plan effective.
Okay. And this aid would be like hired by the school district, or your company is hired by the school district? How it is, how is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the school district would do a contract with me, and I would
Okay.
hire the employees in my company. So sometimes people would say, well, why would an employer go to your company rather than going directly to the school district? And why would a school district take your company rather than hiring directly? So the first thing is, the school district, when they hire directly, they're going to have to provide certain things for that employee,
Training,
depending on how,
support.
yes, all of that, right? So if they don't have time to do that, they just need to get somebody in. It's a benefit to hire outside. For people who would want to work for my company instead of the school district, well, it depends. If they're a student, for example, and they're really into ABA and they want to be able to learn how to properly implement behavior intervention plans, how to follow them correctly, what do we do when we need to modify, then they're going to get that kind of training in my setting, even though they're still in schools and they're still getting an opportunity to connect with people in schools. So it's a little bit more ABA focused than would be in a school, because if they go through the school, they're not going to get ABA training. Most
Mhm.
of our one-on-one aides that go through this school are just kind of placed in the classroom and good luck. And I know that's not fair, That's really not fair to the kids, but that's what happens. So if the person I hire comes through me instead of through the school, they're going to pick up so many more behavioral analytics skills. They're going to be able to take that with them wherever they go, and they'll get a really strong foundation for whatever it is they want to do moving on. So if they want to be a BCBA, now you have all this time in learning about ABA, learning about plan implementation, learning the principles of ABA. But if they want to be a teacher, they can still take what they learned and apply it to the teaching setting as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the district has a contract with you, and the district is obligated to provide an aid if this kid qualifies for one. Like it needs to be justified why this kid needs an 101 aid.
Yeah, so if the student typically that is going to get that 101 aid is going to, not always, but 90 something percent of the time, they're going to be a student who has an IEP and they've had a full assessment for a one-to-one aid, because that is something that can be provided via the IEP. The reason I say 90 something percent, because you do get those rare occasions where you have a student who has not even been identified for special education yet. They may be in the process of identification and they're just really struggling. And the school district is like, we need to get somebody in here now, even though we don't have it written in and they haven't qualified, we just need to get somebody in. So that does happen. Or every now and again, remember that 504 I was talking about? Every now and again, you might have a 504 student who needs behavioral support. Now, here's the thing about that. If you get a 504 student and they're needing a one-on-one aid, as a school district, you should be asking, wait a minute, do they possibly need an IEP? Do we need to do a full assessment? So that's kind of hard to say that a 504 student would only have a one-on-one aid, because at that point, you should be asking as a district, is the student possibly disabled under IDEA? Is there another assessment we need to do under IDEA? So those are the rare cases where you might have a one-on-one aid outside of an IEP. Otherwise, they would be assessed via the IEP process, and there would be a particular one-on-one aid assessment. So I have a colleague who created a one-on-one aid assessment training, and it's really fabulous. So that's what we use in our area, but every district has their own procedure for how they would do their one-on-one aid assessment. So it's not just it's not like a standard, here's the United States one-on-one aid assessment, or here's California's one-on-one aid assessment. Everybody's going to have their own sort of approach to that one-on-one aid assessment. And if you want to see what that might look like at different places, I could provide that to you. Just let me know and I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Yes, please. I want. No, that's so interesting. And I am just thinking that you can have like your business providing for like other county school districts, like that are not like near you, because that's something that you can totally organize like online. So that's really amazing.
Yes, and one of the benefits, like if a district asks me, well, why should we pick you? I would tell them, because I have this experience in navigating the culture of schools. Because that's the other issue, Michelle, is that sometimes ABA companies come in, and if they don't know how to navigate teachers, it could be very, there could be some sparks.
Disaster, like a disaster. Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
No, it makes like total sense, because you are inside and you have all this background. So like you are the perfect fit for this job, like to be mentoring these aides and also making them fit the school as part of the place, because they need to, like when you were at the school, like you were an aide of John, for example, but John will be inside a whole class, a whole school. So you need to know how to navigate all these spaces and different professors that are there. So you need someone to like train you on that, and someone who is used it with this environment. So totally sense. And for the district, like much, much better because they already have a lot on their plate.
Yeah. And, I think ultimately my biggest thing, and I always try to say, I want to make like a motto, but I don't know exactly what it's going to be. But like, if I can help more adults, I can help more kids. And that's my
Yeah.
biggest thing is like helping adults help kids. And I don't know, do you guys have something called multi-level marketing in Brazil? Do you know what that is? Like a pyramid
No,
scheme? You ever heard of it? Okay,
no,
so
I don't think
I'm
so.
laughing because it kind of I'm laughing because it's one of those things like in the United States, we have, I don't know why, but like we have this situation where people will join multi-level marketing. And so if you ever hear of like LuLaRoe or Plexus or these companies, right? And it's like if you're working for Plexus and then you get me to work for you. And now
Oh,
I
yes,
sell
we
the
have
product.
that. Okay, like for
So like
example,
Herbalife.
yeah, Herbalife. Yes, we have here.
Yes,
Yes, yes, I get.
yes.
We that we
So
essential
I always
oils,
say, yes,
oils. Yeah,
exactly. So I always say, I say I'm going to be the multi-level marketing of ABA,
Yeah,
right? Because it's like, okay, I get you, and then you get this many kids, and then they grow up and they get this many people, and and there is actually, I was actually surprised because I had never heard it, but when I was taking my supervision course, they talked about it was called pyramidal, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, pyramidal, basically a pyramid approach
uh-huh,
to training
uh-huh.
people and then they train people. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, so
yeah,
this is actually an ABA concept. Okay, I
yeah.
didn't remember ever learning that concept.
It had like
So
some
yeah.
papers on implementation, for example, of packs through pyramidal approach and training teachers. Yes, yes, it has. Yes, your business like it totally matches that idea. Yeah, great. So like huge, and like you can go that like nationally because you don't need just to provide to California state because you can connect with many professionals through the internet. I'm so excited. Like I
Yeah.
want to see where this goes. Like
Oh,
super
thank
like
you. I love that.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Such
No,
positive energy.
like
And yeah.
no
And
huge. Like just love
yeah.
it.
And did you know, a lot of people don't know this, but did you know we still have spanking in schools sometimes in America with like a paddle?
Wow.
Yeah, I could send you that too if you want to read it. But
Wow.
there's
Yes.
certain states that still allow that. And to me, that's another thing that we need to just,
Like
again, if we can just,
they allow a teacher.
a
Wow.
principal usually, yes. And it's, I'll send you a documentary. Let me make a note real quick. You got to
Yeah.
watch this
Yeah.
documentary and maybe you could share it with people that are watching.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
called The Kids We Lose. I'm going to make a note here.
Yeah.
So
I
actually, I'm going to
cannot
make a note to
believe
send you.
this.
Yes, and I'll send you The Kids We Lose, data on spanking in schools, and then I'll also send you those one-on-one aid examples.
Yeah.
Um,
And also the payments tables like we talked
oh yes,
earlier.
pay scale of, yeah,
Yeah.
for educators. And so I'm like, if this, to me, it's just so ineffective. Like, so you're waiting until this kid is just having so much trouble, they're so dysregulated that they're going to the principal's office to get a spanking. And it's just so backwards, like the way that we're intervening. And it's not every state, it's not, but there are still states, and there's no law of, the United States law that says you can't
Regulating.
do that.
I cannot
Yes,
believe this. Like
yes, it's
this would
crazy.
here would be considered child abuse.
Yes, I mean that would be, appropriate, but that kind of goes back to some of these challenges we have in the United States
I
where, it's just kind of we're very punitive as a culture. We very much are very punitive. And I think
yeah.
that this is some of that. We see that, we see that um and I want to change that culture with educators especially. Let's stop being punitive. Let's start getting to those antecedents and really intervening and having even antecedent interventions where we're not waiting to react and inadvertently many times reinforcing the behavior that we're so against. So I'll send that to you, and I'll also send you this really important packet on restraint and seclusion from the United States government that goes into some data as well. So,
wow, like I am like, I don't know, I had no idea, because this is so like, I don't know what to even say. Like, I never thought that this would still happen in the United States, like that I see as so a modern culture. Like, never this could cross my mind. And let's just take a moment to let people know how you advocate for dyslexia, because we need to like also have a moment to talk about this. So I know that your son, your youngest son, that he's 11 years old, he's dyslexia. So let's just take a moment for you to tell us and teach us a little about this, because we have lots of teachers, lots of professionals, and also parents that sometimes their kids, they are like having difficulties, and you think like your kid is just lazy, he does not want to do the work, he does not like the school. But many times that's not the case. That many times your kid, he has some learning disability, and that's the case for dyslexia.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit it on the head when you said that so many parents, they just get frustrated. They're like, if you would only try harder, not realizing that there's an actual brain difference for these kids, you know, and neurologically their brain is different, which is causing trouble with language. And I think a lot of people have the misconception that dyslexia is like a vision issue, but it's a brain issue. It's beyond vision. It's the way our brain processes language. And so with my little boy, you know, when he was younger, we started to kind of see some of the signs and symptoms when he couldn't pick up the alphabet, he wasn't remembering sounds and letters. And nonetheless, we kind of pushed through. We got to kindergarten, and his kindergarten teacher was what we would describe here as like old school. So she was very focused on the things that, like when we went to school, when I was in kindergarten, the way my teacher would have been, because the newer teachers are not like that. They're much more adamant about, you know, letters, sounds, reading.
Yeah.
The older teachers that teach the old way are more about play, social skills. So she was a good teacher for him because she really emphasized him just being able to get used to school, make friends, you know, develop social skills. And that ended up being really good for him because those are now his strengths. He really has a social strength and also a behavior strength. He's really good about behavior. You're just a really, you know, well-behaved kind of kid. And I think that just having those contingencies in kindergarten were really good for him because they set the stage for him having a good relationship with school, even when it's challenging academically. And when he went into first grade, that's when it became very apparent because he needed to read and he couldn't do it. And, you know, we kind of kept moving on. But at the same time, his father and I were both like, he needs, you know, something, right? He needs an assessment, he needs an IEP, something. And he needs, what we wanted was, you know, intervention. We were asking for intervention, something systematic where we could collect data and look at his growth. And the school district would be adamant that they were providing intervention, but it really wasn't intervention. It was just different book, you know, a small group, and they were doing ineffective practices. Like I went to go observe the group, and some of the ineffective practices are like, okay, look at the word, look at the picture and take a guess of what the word is, which is, I mean, it's proven to be an ineffective skill. And also it's not like that's going to make the difference for a dyslexic student because that's all they're going to do. You're going to reinforce they should look at the picture and guess the word. And there's not going to be pictures when they get to fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. It's just going to be text. They have to learn to decode. So we ended up finding Orton Gillingham approach. Have you heard of that before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we found that, and we started going to a tutor who did the Orton Gillingham approach, and we were going a couple of days a week, and you know, it was at somebody's house, and it was good. It was good, but it was slow. It was very slow. And you know, he was okay. He was growing, but it was just so slow. And sometimes I'd be there listening in, and I just think, wow, this is like kind of boring, not to be mean, but it was just, even me as a parent thinking, geez Louise, this is a lot. So then I'm in this ABA program, and our last class, the way they set it up at Fit, it was like a bunch of different guest lecturers. And one of those guest lecturers was Kimberly Nix Behrens, who created Fit.
Yep.
And she's showing the data. And I'm like, and I'm so familiar with Ames Web. That's what I was using in one of my districts. And so she was showing like the Ames Web data, and I'm like reading this percentile rate growth for these kids that got this direct instruction and precision teaching. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And she's showing it over and over again. And I'm just like immediately just like, okay, I need to figure out what this is. So I Google what she's talking about, and I find a center a mile from my house. I mean, a mile, like walking distance. And I'm like, what the heck? So I asked my TA for that class. I'm like, is this real? Like, I mean, I know we're in the ABA program, but is this,
It is some kind of scam. What is this? Like,
right, exactly. Yes.
Is it right? Good.
Yes, exactly. And so then I'm like, I tell her, my son's dyslexic. I just want to know, like, is this legitimate? She's like, yes, go run down there. So I go over there, make an appointment. I meet the person. Her name is Dr. Julie Albanese. She's so amazing. She's young, she's cool, she's really, good with the kids. And I meet her, and she talks to me a bit about what their program is, and she says she can assess him. He gets assessed, and this is during the pandemic. So we put him on a program where he's going to go there. They have the little, partitions and whatnot, but they were taking in person. So we put him in a program where he was going to go there, basically 2 to 3 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week. And immediately within a month, 2 months, he was reading pre-kindergarten level. He's a third grader at this point. And within a month, 2 months, he's already up to the first grade level. And as time went on, he just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And now he can read really strong at the fourth grade. Like he's like 90 something percentile at the fourth grade. And at the fifth grade level, he's in lower percentile, but it's still within the expected range. And I'll tell you, we tried so much. I even did intervention with him at home. Again, the Orton Gillingham, but Fit, it was fast. It's efficient. It required him to work quickly, so it kept him engaged the whole time. And then they have a whole bunch of reinforcement built in, and it's all, direct instruction and precision teaching. So they're breaking down the big, it's like what you call a task analysis in ABA. I know you're familiar. If everybody's listening, a task analysis is you break a bigger task up into smaller chunks. And so that's essentially what they do for reading, math, and logic. Let's take these big tasks and break them into smaller chunks. If we can train all of these little pieces, we can get big results. And we even see with his data, they use the standard acceleration chart. We can see his data and how it changes. And then we can also see, she breaks all the pieces down, and I have to show you, but it'll be like, here's the different areas that we trained in. And then there'll be areas they didn't train in, and you just see a tremendous amount of growth. So basically he's getting for free growth in certain areas that's just translating because he's growing in other areas. And he loved it. He loves them. He's so cute. He says, I want to invite them to my wedding when I get older. He loves them so much. He has never, I mean, at the beginning, it would be where he just, like anything, any kid, they just want to stay home. But once he got into the swing of it, I mean, he loves it. And also, I don't know if it's like just America that says it's popular in Brazil, but he does jujitsu. So he started doing jujitsu at the same time, pretty much. He started doing jujitsu pretty much simultaneously with Fit. And so the really cool thing about that is that jujitsu is also, you're starting from nothing. You have to be very patient. You have to learn little by little and keep building on your skills to get this big outcome, right? So he never stopped jujitsu either. So he still does it. It's been almost 3 years that he's been doing jujitsu, almost 3 years that he's been doing Fit. And they were very complementary of one another because there were so many of these lessons that no matter what, you show up, you get it, you get to working, and it's going to build and build and build. And one day you'll look back and say, wow, I can read, or wow, I can put somebody in a chokehold. That's amazing. So it's been really good. It's been really good. And we are so thankful to Fit. And it's incredible the growth he's made. And I am really advocating for it over and over again that school districts teach this way. I'm like, okay, so you don't want to hire Fit? just get them to come and consult with you so they can tell you how to just change your teaching practices so that you're more effective. And of course, there's that big, data set from this is like the 60s and 70s. Was it Project Follow Through? That said over and over again, this is the effective way to teach. And it's obvious. And I'm like, come on, let's change education. And that's what I always say to people here in the US. We need a revolution in education. We're still stuck teaching this old way that worked in the 50s and 60s, but that's not what works today. So let's make it work. Let's change. And, direct instruction is good for everybody, not just our kids who have dyslexia. It can help any kid. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, no, that's definitely what we advocate. And about jiu-jitsu, I don't know if you know, but we have a really popular Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Royce Gracie?
Yes, the Grace family, yes. In Rio. So probably your son knows it since he likes jiu-jitsu.
Yes, and his professor has his gym here, but then recently his professor's professor came from Brazil to move here.
Okay.
I forgot his name. Wander Braga. So Wander is here now, and so now it's like really the Brazilian influence is there, right there. You're seeing it. He's Wander, and he's telling you, and he's teaching you. So I'm really happy for my son because I feel like jiu-jitsu it's such an amazing sport, and also it's a peaceful sport. So despite what people think, it's like you're not really needing to use it unless you absolutely have to use it. But you're peacefully getting there, and you're learning so many lessons in that sport every single time you're practicing for it. So he goes about 4 days a week, and I'm really proud of him for sticking with it. And his ultimate goal, he says, is to be a red belt, which is really hard to do. You have to start now as a child and keep through your whole life. Wow. So I hope that he sticks with it because I think it's a good skill for life. And I think it can really help a person, throughout their lifetime.
Yeah, probably gives him more confidence in himself.
100%. Yeah, it really helped too because, like I said, at the same time, he's, dealing with this dyslexia. It's coming to terms. And that's the other part I would say to parents that are listening is don't be afraid to tell your child you have this situation going on and we can help you, because the worst thing for a kid is for them to not understand why they can't do something the way their peers can. And I have a video of him on my page where he talks about how when he didn't know he had dyslexia, he would think, I'm just dumb. I just don't know what to do. And just helping your child to recognize that we all have differences and, it's okay to be neurodiverse. You just need to learn a different way. And, I think that really helps their self-esteem, because hand in hand with, any kind of challenge, autism, dyslexia, math problems, there's comes some comorbid, sometimes anxiety, depression, and things like that. And so it's really important to equip your child with the knowledge of their situation, because then they don't feel so they don't feel like it's such an external locus of control, meaning this is just happening to me. You put the power in their hands to take charge and to know, no, I have power, and
they're active.
Exactly.
They can do something about. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Like amazing. So good to know all these stories and all your background and all about dyslexia and what it worked for your kid, because it gives hope for all the families, and we make teachers more aware of what they need to learn about, because you don't know how to look for things that you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So they don't know that they need this. And it's so funny that we have a coursework inside our post-graduation. It would be a module, but in the US system, it would be like a coursework that it's called ABA in Education. So we have this since 2018. And we have classes of precision teaching and direct instruction and personalized system of instruction, PSI. So all this like inside the post-graduation of the ABA. So that's something that I'm really proud about, because it was my idea to bring this to our ABA post-graduation, to put like ABA inside education. Now that's what I'm like studying now, like theory of instruction here. So that's all the things that I am, how to design a curriculum, how to organize an instruction, make lessons. So like that's something that I am already talking about like since 2018. So I stay so happy about, because I know that many masters in ABA, like they don't have like a whole coursework on that, unless that is in a specific coursework, a specific course or master that it's about this. But usually this does not happen. So like we have this, so I always say, oh, our post-graduation, like we have things that ABA masters in the US does not have. And they are able to have access this here, paying in our own currency instead of paying in dollars, since our money value is almost 6 times less than the US dollar. Yeah. So like that's a huge difference. So like they have the barrier, Brazilians have the barrier of the language, and we have the barrier of the money, because even if you win, like you need to really have lots of money, because our money values so much less. So that's how things stay like really like people cannot afford this. So maybe they have the language but they don't have the money, or they have the money but they don't have the language. So that's a huge barrier to knowledge. So like wow. Yeah, so I'm really proud about that, to bring this perspective to the Brazil's education. So just a quick note on that. So that's something that I really love about direct instruction and studying all those kinds of things, because we can use this with adults when teaching adults using the same principles. So since today I teach adults, so I really like that. Yes. So I just want to share with you.
That is amazing. We need to get it here. We do, and we need it to be part of our teacher education as well. Yep. Because our teachers don't learn that, right? Even I remember I took a class when I was in my teaching program. I think it might have been called like ABA consultation in schools. It was not. I mean, it was on paper, but it was not that, because nobody really understands it in education. I mean, it's a very few people that are going to both understand education and ABA. So, but really, what is learning? Learning is ABA, right? I mean, that is really where learning falls. And so, please bring it to the US when when you're done influencing Brazil. Bring it here, please, because we need it, and that really should be what we do for all of our learners in schools. There shouldn't be this huge amount of kids that can't read. It's huge. If you can see the studies in the US, there's a large amount of kids that can't read by middle school.
I read blind spots. Really you probably
blind spots. Yes.
Yeah, I saw. Yes. I saw the data, and it's like pretty bad for a country like the US, like with all the resources and with all the scientific knowledge that is produced inside the university. So we need to bring this to the schools, to practical applications of all the science that is produced with the universities. Yeah, totally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So like huge conversation. We covered like so many topics. I know that it will help so many people like to see things through a different lens and see different perspectives and different situations. And from this, we can learn and bring things for our practice and our career plan. So I want to thank you so, so, so much. Like, I cannot have words to thank you for your time on a Sunday, to bring all this knowledge. And I really want us to like keep talking and go a sequel, do a part two on specific topics. And I'm like really, really happy. And I want you to know that your experience and everything that you taught us today, that you shared with us, like it will have an impact like for many, many years from now. Because on a moment like 2 years, 3 years from now, it will be someone watching on YouTube or Instagram, and they will like have an insight or have an idea, have a different perspective. So we never know, the ones that we can like, sometimes we don't even know the person and they affect us in a positive way. So that's just what I really want you to let get out of here today, knowing that. So really, really thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that we found one another. And anything that anybody has questions about, they can message me on Instagram. I'm pretty good about replying. You know, I would love to have another conversation. I would love to keep having conversations. I want to help anyone I can help. And of course, you're helping so many people by having this podcast or, your videos. And you're right. Like, it's so interesting, right? Because for me, like, I never met Jose Martinez Diaz and he impacted me so much, right? And just even seeing him talk and his passion. And, you're right, we can impact people and yeah, and anything you need, please let me know. I'm here, and I would love to chat more. And if you come to California, we've got to see each other.
Yeah, definitely we have. Okay, thank you. I will just stop recording to give you a bye bye.